Hello guys, this is Recaps Now here. Today we are going to explain a future-oriented movie called Knowing. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. At the beginning of the movie we see a girl called Lucinda. Lucinda was at school at that time, and it was the interval going on. We see all the children are playing, but Lucinda was an exception to it. Rather, she was standing in such a manner as if to say that she was feeling frightened by someone. We see that Lucinda continuously hearing a few strange voices, as if to say that someone was trying to tell something to her. In the meantime, the interval is over and it's time for the classes to recommence. The teacher was calling everyone to join their class, but Lucinda was unmoved by this and remained fixed at a point as if she could not hear a word. The teacher notices this and she comes to her and takes her to the class. Then the teacher informs them that tomorrow classes would begin officially. She further informs them that a competition would be held for all of them on this occasion. She says that it would be a futuristic drawing competition, where participants needed to draw things that they think will be possible in the future. The whole class was really excited about this competition, and all of them started working on the project except Lucinda. We see that Lucinda is writing some numbers in her workbook. Just as Lucinda was about to write the last number, the duration of the task is over, and Lucinda's teacher takes away her paper and keeps all the drawings in a time capsule. The students are informed that these capsule will be opened in 50 years from now. The next day we see that the time capsule is buried. Then Lucinda's teacher looks at her and we see Lucinda vanish within a blink of an eye. This worries her teacher, and she along with the others start searching and calling her. Lucinda's teacher had reached the basement while searching for her. They hear noises coming from a nearby room, and when they open the door they find Lucinda standing there. But we see she is scared and there was blood on her fingers. Now when they look around they find out that Lucinda had written some numbers on the wall. These were the same numbers that she heard from the murmuring voices and the last numbers that she could not write on her paper. Lucinda was scared by the voices and requested her teacher to stop it. The scene then transfers to 50 years later and we see a scientist who is suffering from depression after the passing of his wife. Here we see that the scientist has a son named Caleb, who was also suffering from the trauma of the death of his mother. Next day, we see a function being held at Caleb's school to celebrate the Golden Jubilee of the institution. And according to the laws of Lexington School, it was time for them to take out the time capsule that was buried 50 years ago. We see that the principal calls Miss Taylor for this task, who was Lucinda's teacher at that time. All students receive a letter from that time capsule. Caleb also gets a letter, but in his letter, we see that nothing was drawn, unlike others. But Caleb's letter had numbers engraved in it. This is because he had got Lucinda's letter. Here we see Caleb could also hear murmuring voices around him. He thought that these voices were coming from quite a distance. And when he thinks about them again, they cease to come. On their return to the house, the scientist, who was named John, and Caleb are shown talking to each other. At the same time, John notices Lucinda's letter. He was amazed by the letter, and he was quite sure that the letter had a coded message. After that, we see John ignoring those numbers. After a while, he mistakenly keeps his glass on the letter. As a result, some of the numbers become encircled. When he investigates the letter, John finds that the numbers formed a date when many children died in a classroom. Then he looks up the internet and finds that date in an article, and comes to know how many people died that day. The scientist was astounded by this. We then see how he examines each of the numbers on that letter. He concludes that those were numbers with some significance. Either they were dates or digits. These numbers indicated to either any natural disaster, and the numbers preceding those were the number of casualties in that particular incident. This included the dates of the disaster and casualties that had been sustained in them from the day Lucinda wrote the letter to the present day. The scientist John then uses red and blue ink to mark those dates and the number of casualties suffered, but there were still some figures he could not find out. The next day, we see John meets one of his colleagues and shares information about Lucinda's letter. John tells him that the dates and numbers were when a calamity has occurred around the world and the number of deaths in them. He also informs his friend that it formed a sequence. John then mentions that the paper has tomorrow's date where 81 people will die. But it was hard to believe the facts for John's colleague, and it might simply be a coincidence. He argues that the paper also had numbers which did not make any sense. He advises John to go home and relax, as others might make fun of him if they hear his logic, and it may be merely a prank that somebody has done with you. Then John goes to visit Miss Taylor to find out the truth about the letter. and she confirms the fact that the letter was absolutely original and was indeed written by a girl named Lucinda. She further tells John how Lucinda was feeling disturbed and heard strange voices at the time of writing this letter. We then Miss Taylor recalls what had happened 50 years ago and how Lucinda had written numbers on the wall using her blood. Now we are shown that John wanted to know more about Lucinda, but her teacher informs that Lucinda had died of a strange disease a few years back. When he comes out, John notices Caleb was talking to a stranger who gives him a stone and leaves. The scene then shifts to the next day when John is seen going to Caleb's school to pick him up, but he was stuck in the traffic and could not proceed as planned. When suddenly, he looks up at the car's GPS. Suddenly he sees a few numbers on the system that match the list of numbers on Lucinda's letter. Upon investigation, he finds out that a plane crash had indeed occurred there. John goes home and searches for the facts related to the crash and finds out that 81 people had indeed died in the crash as predicted by Lucinda in her letter. We then see the stranger who had given Caleb the black stone in Caleb's room. He shows Caleb a scene from the future where a fire has broken out and people were seen running for their life. Caleb is afraid by this and shouts loudly. Hearing this, John quickly reaches his son and calms him down. But the mystery man had already escaped. John sees him outside the window, and the man disappears from the place within no time, and John fails to catch him. The next day, we see John somehow reaches Lucinda's daughter while continuing his research on her. The name of Lucinda's daughter was Diana. John tells her about Lucinda's letter whose predictions were turning out to be true. He further elaborates that an accident will occur in 3 days' time, in which 33 people will die. Now we see John asks for Diana's help to safeguard these people. But Diana did not understand a thing of what John was saying. So she leaves from the place with her daughter. Reaching home, John sees the news in which they were telling about the upcoming terrorist attack. John uses Lucinda's sheet to inform the police that a terrorist attack would take place at the subway station. John then accompanies the cops to the subway station, where they find a man who was a suspected terrorist. In reality, he was a petty thief. In the meantime, they see that another train had changed its track. Due to this change in track, there is a collision between the two trains. A chaos is created, and the passengers are seen rushing for safety. Here also we see that a number of people died in the accident, which again proved Lucinda's predictions were accurate. Now after John survives the crash, he returns home to find that Lucinda's daughter was waiting, who tells him that the last digit in the letter was relevant to an upcoming calamity. Diana also informs him that Lucinda used to say that I will die on this date. She also informs him that it was due to this particular reason that she used to dislike her mother, because she had the prior knowledge of people's death. Now we see that Diana takes John to the house where Lucinda used to go when she wanted to hide from the world. Here we see them observe the last digit of the letter, where E was written twice in a reverse order. They thought these words were Lucinda's surname. On further investigation inside the house, they find that the E was the symbol for everyone else, and that everyone else would die on this date, as mentioned in the letter. John also notices the black stones were present in Lucinda's house, which the stranger used to give Caleb. The scene then shifts outside where both Diana's daughter and Caleb were waiting in the car when those mysterious people whom Caleb had previously seen, and we see that these people inviting kids to come to meet them. These whispers were exactly the same as was heard by Lucinda, which was also heard by Caleb at the beginning of the movie. Here we see Caleb's smartness, and he presses the car's horn, which alerts John and Diana. But by the time they come outside, the mysterious people had disappeared. But John was able to see the back of one of the men and catches him and asks him, "What do you want?" Just then the man opens his mouth, and we see a bright spark being emitted from his mouth, and he disappears even before John could do anything. After this, we see all of them were at John's house, and here we see Diana grieving about how she also thought Lucinda's predictions were true, and that now the time came when everyone would die the next day according to Lucinda, and that it was their last night together in this world with everyone. After a while, Diana's daughter is seen to be drawing a picture. From the picture, John concludes that the upcoming disaster will be from the sun. Next, we see that he goes to his office and checks the solar system and its positions. He sees the radiation levels were extremely abnormal. When John comes home, he finds Caleb writing letters similar to that of Lucinda. Here we see Caleb remember what the teacher told about Lucinda writing some numbers and letters on the door. We then see how John rushes to the school and gets that door and returns home. But upon his return, he does not find the kids and Diana because as soon as John left, Diana took the kids to hide inside a cave so that they could escape the coming disaster. John finds through his calculations that there were places that people could escape to and avoid the solar disaster. But he does not find anybody at home, so follows Diana. Then we see Diana at a filling station, where the news of the disaster is being televised, and how everyone was going to need underground shelter to survive. Diana then calls John and informs about her whereabouts. John informs her that the only safe shelter that they had was Lucinda's old house where she hid herself. While they were on the phone, some people steal Diana's car and takes the kids with them. Diana steals another car and follows the kidnappers. But as she was in a hurry, she meets an accident and dies according to Lucinda's predictions. We then see John somehow manages to reach the safe house and sees the mysterious people and is about to shoot them when Caleb informs that these people were here to protect us. Here it is revealed to us that these people were the ones whose voice Lucinda used to hear and who were giving us the information about the upcoming happenings. Then we see that a spaceship arrives there and John understood it was time to leave the Earth. But the spaceship only takes Caleb and Diana's daughter with them, as the spaceship was designed for the kids. Here we see John and Caleb hug for one last time. The scene then shifts when John wakes up to see himself lying with a black stone in his palm. He understood that the disaster had started and he rushes to meet his parents. He hugs them and informs that Caleb was safe. We then see the explosion had eradicated the world. In the ending scene, we see that the spaceship dropped the children at different locations, and that Caleb and his friend Diana's daughter were at a heavenly place. Thus, the movie ends. Thank you for watching.